The old mayor.
There should be another resolution on the infrastructure.
Oh, no, we're missing the highway one here.
We start the resolution.
There you go. Pay attention.
Matthew's starting at these numbers.
Did you want to stay?
What were you doing? You don't need to. Oh, you need to. Oh, yeah.
Yes, because they think
Usually, especially late.
I'll just tell them they can't do this and like
I'm doing well, are you? Those are really people.
You can't go east, can't go south, can't go north. So how long is that code? What problem have we written? 2 weeks? A month? 6 I'm already informed about
And so that'd be right back to I should have just gone to Forest Junction.
Nice to see you.
I need a bigger screen.
We got them, Leah. Please take your seats. Good evening. Good evening, supervisors, staff, and guests. Please, this evening, I don't want you to press your buttons until I tell you to, and we will go back to the old way of voting, like making a motion, okay? We're not going to ask, we'll just, whoever wants to make the motion, you may make the motion. And when we come to the resolutions and the voting, you wait for me to tell you when to press the buttons, okay? Otherwise, you're going to lock up the system. Yes, Mr. Gluckner?
I don't have a button to press. Oh, I'm sorry. It's behind my computer.
I'm sorry, you're voting. All right, we will do roll call. You may press your buttons.
Ty needs to sign it.
He's not here.
Mr. Gluckner, would you confirm, please? Thank you. The other two are- We have 19 present, 2 absent. We have a majority vote, so we'll continue on with our meeting. Please join me, if you're able, in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I need a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Supervisor Irwin. And a second by Supervisor Booty. There are no corrections. Vote your ballot. Supervisor Hulcher, would you confirm? Thank you. We have 19 yes, 0 nay, 2 absent, a majority vote, so we'll move on. Number 4, approval of the minutes of the May 17th, 2022 meeting. A motion, please. A motion by Supervisor Booty, a second by Supervisor Schwallenberg. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, please vote your ballot. Tom, would you confirm, please? Thank you. And Joan, would you confirm?
Got it.
Thank you. 19 yes, 0 nay, 2 absent, so the minutes have been approved. Are there any communications?
There are no communications.
Are there any public participation? Don't see anything. All right. Moving on to this evening, we have special business. We'll be listening to Daniel Fox from the UW-Madison Extension Local Government Specialist, who will talk to us and train us on parliamentary procedure.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Dan. Thank you.
Do I have to push a button? Because I'll be in trouble if I do. I need to get all my props out here. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
My name again is Daniel Foth. I'm a retired attorney, or as I like to refer to myself, a recovering attorney. I heard Trent Lott say that once when I worked in DC, and I thought it was so good I stole it and used it ever since. As noted, I'm a local government specialist at UW-Madison's Division of Extension Local Government Education Program, and our sole goal at the Local Government Education Program is to train local government officials like yourselves on all sorts of matters. I focus primarily on effective meetings, being an effective board member, budget finance, and I do a smattering each year of strategic planning. So let's get started. This is the agenda for today, and we're a little bit cattywampus on the screen. I always have an agenda, that way if you've already know something, you can nap during that part and then wake up for the part you're interested in. I was going to do a little exercise for each of you. Name yourselves, tell me what you do, but in the interest of time tonight, most of your time, I'm going to do something different, which is, how many of you are brand new board members? Please raise your hands. Wow, great. How many of you have been on the board for 1 to 5 years? 1 to 5 years? Couple? How many of you been on a board longer than 5 years? Great, so you are all going to keep me straight, right, as I present tonight? Okay, good. All right, so what is the role of the Calumet County government? For those who've been around for a while, this will be some repetition. And you might note that there's many places in this presentation. I do a lot of repetition, and the reason for that is my wife. My wife is a very devout Catholic, but when we lived in Atlanta, she decided she wanted to go to one of these mega evangelical churches, which is basically a music show with church wrapped around it. So we would go to church along with 4,998 of our closest friends, some fantastic music, but the pastor would repeat himself and it drove me crazy. But my wife, because I grew up Episcopalian, and you had a very different church training than she got, apparently didn't know a lot of this stuff that I knew, and so on the way home I said, honey, what'd you think of it? She said, oh, wasn't it great the way he kept repeating himself so I could understand what he was talking about? And then that's when the light went on for me, realizing that repetition is not a bad thing, it's actually a good thing. But if I start repeating myself too much, you can do what one of the board supervisors did in Iowa County when I did this earlier, about mid last month, he actually fell asleep. Hopefully that won't happen. So what is the county? You folks have a dual purpose. First and foremost, and all of you should know this, but if you don't, you're an arm of state government, right? You effectuate policies, many of the policies the state government puts together. But you're also a local unit of government that's hopefully responsible to some local needs. So here's the statute that defines what county governments do. You're governed by elected board of supervisors, all of you folks, and congratulations on your elections, by the way. Each county is its own body corporate. You can sue or be sued. And the last bullet point is the most important one. Other such acts that are necessary and proper to the exercise of powers and privileges granted and the performance of legal duties. Basically what that means is you can only do what the state says you can do. You're not allowed to do anything else. Cities and villages have home rule powers where they're allowed to do other things, so decide to do other things. Counties do not have that. But you get a half-cent sales tax and they don't, so maybe it evens out. All right, so what is leadership in the context of county government? First and foremost, hopefully by the end of tonight, you'll have a good idea of what your context, what your role is in county government. And hopefully all of you got a copy of the Calumet County Board Rules and have reviewed them at least once. Highly recommend you review them many times because there's a lot of good stuff in there. And once in a while you're going to see a highlighted area. I don't know if that's going to show up or not. On the screen, that's basically where I reference your board rules that might reference some content on the slide. So what's the first thing to remember? Know and stay in your lane. So your lane is your role as a county board supervisor, but your lane is not only defined by what that role is, but it's also defined by the planning your county's done. As I understand it, you have a strategic plan, they're looking at doing a new one. You have a comprehensive plan, sorry, I got a little lost there. If you haven't read your comprehensive plan, I highly recommend you do so. Your comprehensive plan gets updated every 10 years. It has a lot of terrific recommendations that went along with the whole comprehensive planning process. So therefore, take a look at those recommendations, and when it comes budget time, sorry to lose this to you, Todd, think about, are some of those recommendations incorporated in your budget? And if they aren't, you might want to ask why not. You also have a capital improvement plan. Congratulations, that is a wonderful thing because that helps you plan for your capital improvements, the necessary capital improvements you have that keeps your roads in the state of good repair, keeps your equipment up to date, and does all the things, keeps your building with a roof over its head, etc. So what is leadership and management in context of being a county board supervisor? First of all, it's a collective leadership. Even though all of you are titled supervisor, none of you actually supervise anything. It's just a historical term, right? So that means to get anything done, you all have to work together. That's the most important thing I hope you take away from tonight, which is to get anything done, you all have to work together. So as part of doing that, you have a shared vision because you have a vision as part of your county documents, and that again helps you understand what at least previous county boards thought was the vision for the county. From time to time, you'll need to challenge the process, things you're being told, why is that, so on and so forth. We'll have to talk about that some more. Also help others to act. And I always say encourage the heart, because at the end of the day, everything you folks do affects every citizen in the county, even if they don't get your services directly because they might be driving on your county roads. If you have a recycling system, they might be using that. So that's really important. The other thing I want you to take away from this slide is you are not, because you're not supervising anything, you are not involved in the day-to-day management of the county. That's why you hired Todd and his staff. It's their job to manage the day-to-day operations. part of your job is oversight of those operations, but it's not up to you to go check how many potholes are in the road, and so on and so forth. So, the county board function is visionary. So how many of you people think of yourselves as visionary? Well, I'm telling you, you all are, and you should be. And the good news, when you get home tonight, you can tell your spouse or significant other or partner, whatever it is, that you learned tonight that you're a visionary. See what they have to say about that. First and foremost, you're a legislative body, so you enact policies for the county to guide its direction. The staff implements those policies. You adopt the budget and levy taxes. And I would argue, not only because I do a lot of budget training, that the budget is the single most important function that you folks will do. You regulate within the statutory authority, which means you can't do anything more than the state says you can do. You involve, hopefully, represent, and are accountable to your constituents, your voters. And you focus on long-term rather than short-term. You're not worried about the next 6 months. You should be thinking about the next 6 years as you enact your policies. And very important, because I've been to a lot of these kind of meetings, I am the planning chair for the town of Burke, which is in Dane County. We are right next to Sun Prairie, Madison, DeForest, and Windsor. In 13 years, we're going to separate and be part of one of those places. And hopefully I'm out of my house by that time, because their taxes are way higher than my taxes. But one of the big complaints I hear from towns and villages and cities is their county government doesn't really work with them very well. So I'm suggesting to you, and that's all this presentation is tonight, is my suggestions to you. Work with your local governments and try to help them and have them help you. So what are some of your functions? As I mentioned, you're primarily legislative, so you make laws, you approve the budget, and again, cooperative decision making. Your authority, again, is collective. And I know I'm already starting to repeat myself, but I can't emphasize enough that you can't get anything done unless you all work together. You have no management or leadership role. And again, as I mentioned, supervisor is a historical term, so don't take it literally. So what is the difference between policy and administration? Policy is the what and the why. And administration and operations, your staff, are the when, how, and where. So the what and the why is, will we fund new highway equipment because we need to do a better job of plowing our county roads? Why? Well, because you want your citizens to drive on safe roads in the wintertime, right, or safer roads. So having good equipment, up-to-date equipment is important. But it's up to the administration to figure out how they're going to plow the roads, when that equipment might need repair, and if there's some potholes, what the plan is to fix those. So the policy you folks create should relate to the overall mission and purpose of the county. You have a mission statement, you have a vision statement. If you haven't read those, please read those, because that should be one of your guideposts in staying in your lane. It requires you folks to have vision. That's what makes you all visionary. You think longer term, again, not the next 3 months or the next 6 months, but try to focus on the next couple of years, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And make sure you're addressing key issues. Don't avoid key issues. They're just going to sit there and fester and become worse. So grabbing the bull by the horns early is important. And the strategy to how you move the county forward is also important. On the operations side, which is Todd and his staff, they implement your policies. They're in charge of the day-to-day operations. They address department or individual issues. And on that point, all of you are going to get complaints from your constituents about something, right? That's just part of the job. But instead of going to the head of public works or the parks department, or talk to Todd and let Todd handle it. That's the proper chain of command, unless Todd says otherwise. And the other important thing about your staff is they have specialized training. Under the Wisconsin statutes, other than being a certain age and alive and a resident of the county or the district that you're living in, there's no other qualifications to be a county board supervisor other than to get elected. Your staff, though, has got specialized training in finance, management, IT, communications, whatever those things are. That's why you hire them, because you want that specialized training. So in summary, the policy making is the end. It's where you want to get to. And whenever I'm looking at a problem, I always like to start with the end in mind. Where do I want to get to, and how does this problem challenge my ability to do that? And administration is the means. They're what you use to get to the ends. Now, I normally don't admit this early on in a presentation, but I'm from Illinois originally, so I grew up as a Bears fan. I'm not a Cubs fan because I can't stand that much misery in 1 year's time, but I am a Bears fan. But, so it pains me to have to use the Green Bay Packers, but I suspect all of you in some form or fashion are a Packers fan, and probably wouldn't relate to a Bears slang. So the Green Bay Packers has a board of directors. But do you see any of them on the sidelines calling plays or telling players what to do? Nope. Well, you would if you lived in Atlanta, because Arthur Blank does that all the time, but not the Packers. Or, and most importantly, don't see them in the huddle trying to make the plays. So remember, your job is to set the direction for the county, and it's Todd's job to call the plays and effectuate them. So now we're going to move into the real reason you invited me here tonight, is talk a little bit about being an effective supervisor in terms of meetings. And the first and foremost thing you should think about is, before the meeting, prepare for the meeting. Ben Franklin had a great saying, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. And that's very true. And the biggest complaint I get from clerks, not yours of course, because you're all wonderful, I'm sure, but other clerks, is that they have their elected body members show up to meetings, they haven't read the agenda, they haven't read the supporting materials, they don't know a thing about what's going on, and therefore they waste a lot of time in the meeting asking questions that are already answered in the materials that they were given. So when you get your agenda, your supporting materials, read through it. That's part of your job as a supervisor. If you have questions about something on the agenda, either talk to the committee chair for that particular agenda item, talk to Todd, and he or one of his staff will get the information to you. But that doesn't mean once you get that information, if you still don't like it, you can still bring up the question at the meeting. So I'm not suggesting not to question. What I'm suggesting is preparing. So here's a great graphic, and I'm going to walk over here so I can read the slide. I'm sorry you can't see the top of it, but this will be in the materials that I sent to Kimberly and Todd, and they'll make available to you folks. But take a hard look at this graphic. It's questions a critical thinker asks. What's happening? Why is it important? What don't I see? How do I know whatever I'm being told is true? Who's saying it? Is it a trusted source, or is it the internet? And what else? And what if? So prepare for the meeting. Get to the meetings on time. Guess what the second biggest complaint I hear from clerks is? Their elected body members wander into the meeting whenever the heck they feel like it, sometimes 30 minutes late. Then they want to go back on what's been covered on the agenda because they weren't here when it was covered. So be on time, and I give you all kudos because I think you were all on time early tonight. Respect other opinions and comments. No sidebar discussions. Sometimes when somebody else is speaking, it's really easy to turn to your neighbor and start having a discussion, make a comment, good or bad. That's bad for two reasons. The first reason it's bad is that enough of you start having sidebar discussions, pretty soon the meeting's out of control, correct? The second reason it's bad is if you say something to somebody, he says it to somebody, and she says it to somebody, then you've got a potential open meetings law violation because you're not doing your deliberations in public. Focus on the current topic. I was at a village board meeting up in north central Wisconsin about 4 months ago. It started at 6 p.m. At 12:30 a.m., it was still going strong, primarily because 2 of the 5-member board of the supervisors decided that all they wanted to do every time an item came up for discussion was complain about some mistake the staff had made 2 years before. And they went on and on. And unfortunately, I know you don't have this problem, Madam Chair, but others might. The chair wasn't very good about reining them in. So That's why it's good to focus on what's in front of you, not what may have happened in the past, unless what may have happened in the past is directly germane to something that's currently being discussed. Listen to understand, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Vote, I'll talk some more about that later. Also very important, you all have county electronic devices, I'm assuming? How many of you use your personal phone for county business? Good. I have, on my personal phone, I have UW Outlook application to read emails, and I can also access the UW central server for documents. And the reason that's not a problem is because if someone comes to me and makes an open records request, I refer them to the UW records custodian because I don't keep any UW business on my personal equipment, and you folks shouldn't either. So, again, show up, be prepared, stay on the agenda, confine your remarks to the pending issue. There may be an item on the agenda that's like 3 or 4 items down that you're really interested in. So when you get up to speak on the current item, maybe it's item 2, and item 5 is the one you're interested in, and you say, well, I don't have much to say about this, but I really want to get to item 5. Resist that urge. Wait till you get to item 5. And I'll get to the golden rule. Somehow this got out of order. Refrain from speaking against your own motion. We've all done this. You're in a meeting, you think you've got a great idea, you make a motion, somebody seconds it, the chair restates it, the group starts discussing it, and you realize based on the discussion that you have made a horrible mistake, right? It's a bad motion. There's a couple ways to deal with that, which I'll talk about, but one way not to deal with it is to stand up and say, well, I made a bad motion. You could stand up and say, I move to withdraw the motion, and then you go through the exercise of that, but don't speak against your own motion. Avoid negative motions. So a negative motion is when the outcome of the vote is unclear. So for example, somebody makes a motion and says, we're not going to send Todd to the Counties Association annual meeting this year. Somebody seconds, starts having discussion, get for a vote. So if it's voted no, right, the no's win. Does Todd get to go to the County Association's annual meeting? I don't know. Does he? Because what's the effect of the no vote? What's the effect of the yes vote? So when you're making a motion, think through, do I understand the impact of each? And your chair will also do a great job of when a negative motion might be made, of saying, that motion's kind of out of order because it's a negative motion. Can you restate that positively? Also refrain from actions that disturb the assembly. So what that means is somebody makes a motion and somebody over here goes, that's the dumbest damn thing I've ever heard. Excuse me, the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's an action that disturbs the assembly, right? Because now passions start to get up. If you dislike the motion, wait for your turn during the discussion and stand up and say, I'm against this motion for X, Y, and Z reasons. But one of the reasons should not be because it's the dumbest motion you've ever heard. And finally, respect the golden rule. If everybody here follows the golden rule in context of you're working with each other, you'll never have to worry about a lot of this other stuff I'm going to talk about. Biases are the next thing that we all suffer from. But we all bring biases to whatever we're doing in life, right? And so these are James Clear, which is noted at the bottom, has a lot of great information on leadership. He wrote an article about the 5 common biases that affect good decisions. I'm using 4 of those here. The survivorship bias is where you know one thing, but you've forgotten a whole bunch of other things about that same subject, but that one thing stays in your mind, and that's what becomes fact. When, in truth, there's all kinds of facts on that issue that you're ignoring. So that's the one issue that survives. Loss aversion. You're afraid to lose something. So if I gave all of you $10, you'd all be pretty happy, right? But then if I immediately took it back, trust me, your emotional reaction to losing the $10 would be much stronger than it was when I gave you the $10 in the first place. So that's what loss aversion is. The available heuristic is when there's all kinds of information, and you probably can't see it, but that little red dot in the center of the available heuristic, is what you know about it, or what the news media may report about it. So when you're looking at an issue, use the critical thinker steps that I've provided you, and that will help you ask better questions and get more information. And the granddaddy of all bias, and we all suffer from this, is confirmation bias, where you only search out information for what that supports your position and you ignore everything else. I suffer from this greatly and have pretty much my entire life. My wife will tell you that she's suffered through it for about 22 years now. But what I try to do, if I've got a decision in front of me and I'm pretty well convinced I'm right, I put all that aside and I try to learn everything I can about what others think about the issue. Mostly because I want to confirm I'm right, but I'm not just seeking out information to confirm it, I'm finding out what the other side thinks. And sometimes more often than I'd like to admit, I learn something that causes me to rethink my original view on the subject. Listening is the next big issue. And if any of you are married, well, if you were married to my wife, she'd tell you listening is the big issue in our marriage, mostly because I don't listen. The biggest problem with communication is we do not listen to understand, we listen to reply. How many times have you been having a conversation with somebody and they're going on and on and on, and you're just waiting for them to stop so you can tell them why they're wrong? We all suffer from that. Another one I like is listen more than you talk. You already know everything you've got to say. Right? We do. So find out what the other side thinks. Another way to think about working together is positions versus interests. So a position is what you want. So in this example, I don't want the county to adopt the zoning ordinance. Why wouldn't you want a zoning ordinance? Because I don't want people to tell me what to do with my land. But once you understand that's what the person's issue is, now you can start having conversations about, well, if you get to do what you want with your land, that also means your neighbor gets to do what they want with their land. So if they want to build an airport on their land, is that what you want next to you on your land? If they want to build a strip mining facility on their land, is that what you want in your next land? So you can start having a discussion about their interests and how the zoning ordinance in this case, or whatever the discussion item is, can be discussed in a way to help them see the benefit to the item or help amend the item in a way that fits their concerns. And this book, Getting to Yes, if you haven't read it, it's a great book. Highly recommend it. That's where this information comes from. When you get the PowerPoint, this is a great graphic about getting to yes. It has a lot of good information. Highly recommend you read it and think about it. So Robert's Rules of Order. Now we're going to get to the meat of the presentation. Your county, except for where it has a rule different, has adopted Robert's Rules of Order as its method of meetings. So this is a Roberts book. It's the 12th edition. It's white. That way you know it's the 12th edition. You might have an earlier one, but this is the latest and greatest. How many of you read Robert's Rules or some of it? Do you find it to be very arcane and confusing and hard to understand? I do, and I teach this stuff. So this is the book you should get. It's Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised in brief, the 3rd edition. The 2nd edition is also yellow, so make sure you're getting the 3rd edition. This has about 98% of everything you need to know about meeting procedures without having to read this book. And if you're kind of a parliamentarian junkie, this has references back to this book, so it's easy to find the mothership if you think you need it. Also, all of you got one of these county officials' handbooks from the Counties Association at your organizational meeting, or should have. And if you don't have one, just call the County Association office. They'll make sure you get one. This is a terrific reference for just about everything you're going to deal with, from budgets, to ethics, to meeting procedures, public records law, open meetings law, etc. So now we're going to talk about getting stuff done. And it starts with a motion. And under Roberts, a motion is a formal proposal by a member of a body in a meeting that the body takes certain action. So let's deconstruct that. It's a formal proposal. I move that. I want this to happen by a member of the body. So if I'm attending this meeting, I can't stand up and make a motion, right? Because I'm not a member of the body. Only you all can make motions and the chair. In a meeting, Wisconsin law does not allow proxy votes or proxy motions. You have to be present to make the motion, and you have to be present to vote, to take certain action. And that's the essence of the motion, right? You want something to happen. So this meeting here says, meeting was called to discuss the meat. It has been pointed out there is no meat. Therefore, the motion is on the floor to fight over the bones. You ever have meetings like that? So the main motion starts the discussion process. I move that. You might hear that one more time. There are different types of motion. You have the main motion, which gets things going. But you can only have one main motion on the floor at any one time. So if one of you makes a motion to fix a road or to create a program to put your roads in good repair, and someone else makes a motion to fix the fire truck's got to wait till the road discussion gets done. There's other kinds of motions. Privilege motions, which relate to the meeting. Subsidiary motions, which relate to the treatment of the main motion, amendments, etc. And incidental motions, which relate to the conduct of the meeting. In other words, how is a meeting being run correctly? So motions under Wisconsin law are required on all matters. Roberts requires them on substantive issues. But I want to make it clear that the way you operate with motions in this body might be very different in your committee or commission meetings. In this body, typically a motion gets things started, you have the discussion, etc., but it's very formal, and you want to make sure you have the motion, the second, the chair restates, and then you can move forward. In committees, lots of times you'll have all kinds of discussion before you even get to a motion, and that's okay. The other thing state law requires is that each motion has a second, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. I already talked about negative motions. Another thing is important is some of these meetings, you're going to get a stack of papers from some consultant, from one of the staff members. You want to receive that information. You don't want to accept it. You certainly don't want to approve it unless you've read it and understand what it says. And the reason to receive it versus accepting is when you accept it, you know, I might have called one of the staff members and say, put a couple lines in that saying, send Dan Fogle from Extension to Hawaii. Once you've accepted that motion, I'm gold, right? I'm going to Hawaii. So you want to avoid that. The other thing that's really important is you want to avoid affirming existing policy. If you have a policy on something, why do you need to reaffirm it? You've already got the policy. You're just wasting everybody's time. The motion should be stated fully and repeated by the chairperson once seconded. Now that doesn't mean, the word fully doesn't mean a 30-minute explanation about why it's the most wonderful motion in the world. It means a short, clear statement of what you want to happen. Save the wonderful reasons for the motion during the discussion. Again, under state law, the motion must be seconded. Now under Roberts, they have what they call incidental, where, and this happens frequently at committee meetings, where you're having a big discussion, someone makes a motion, you forget to get the second because you want to get on to passing the motion. Because you've had all that discussion, that effectively takes the place of a second. Privilege motions, as I mentioned, relate to the meeting itself. You might raise a question of privilege. That would be like call for orders. Somehow the chair's gotten off the agenda order, and you just, Madam Chair, have a call for question of privilege. I believe you're off the agenda. Or you can be meaner and say, please stick to the agenda. There's a pressing issue. For example, the building's on fire. Maybe it's a good time to adjourn the meeting or until a later date while the fire gets taken care of. Recess. You got to use the bathroom pretty bad, so you ask for a 10-minute recess so that can happen. Or you fix a time to adjourn, which means you might want to adjourn the meeting before the agenda's done. And we'll talk a little bit about that some more. Subsidiary motions, again, relate to the treatment of main motions. So lay on the table, and I'll spend a lot of time talking about that because that's the most misconstrued subsidiary motion there is. Previous question, in other words, you want to get to the vote, so you call, a lot of people say call the question, and by calling the question doesn't mean that discussion stops. You still have to have a second, you still have to have a vote. So saying you're calling the question, the correct way to do that is I move to end debate, or I move to call the question. That also requires a 2/3 vote to pass, as opposed to a simple majority for many other motions. You want to amend the motion. You like the motion, but you think you can make it a little better. You want to postpone the motion, and I'll talk some more about that when I get to the tabling discussion. Lots of times you're having a discussion about a motion, and it's pretty clear that more thought needs to be put into it, so you might make a motion to refer that item to its appropriate committee for them to look it over. Typically, that motion also comes with, and bring it back to us in the next meeting or a couple meetings or some date in the future. You might want to extend debate. You might have a very controversial subject. Under Roberts, you're allowed to speak 2 times, up to 10 minutes each, on any topic. I didn't remember seeing that in the board. 3 minutes, that's right.
No, 3 times.
3 times, but there's a time limit? Ooh, okay. So think about this. Each of you are speaking 3 times for 10 minutes each. That's a 3:30 in the morning meeting by the time you're done, I think. So not to tell you what to do, you might want to think about limiting the time per talk, but that's just up to you. Incidental motions, they reflect to the conduct of the meeting itself. So if you have a complex motion that has a lot of parts to it, you might want to divide the motion into its respective parts. Point of order, you're off the agenda. And you'll notice some of these incidental motions and subsidiary motions seem like they're the same thing, and that's the beauty of Roberts, they are. So if you're confused, don't be surprised, because a lot of people are. You might want to withdraw the motions. Remember my earlier discussion about not speaking against your motion. The proper way to get rid of a motion that you made is to make a second motion to withdraw that motion. Maybe you want to appeal the decision of a chair. You made a point of order, the chair's ruled against you, and you want the body to decide whether the chair is right or not. We'll talk about that. You might want to suspend the rules. Remember we talked about suspending rules in the other one? That goes back to where Roberts can be a little confusing. Or you might want to split the main motion, or split amendments to the main motion if they're also in parts. So this chart here is what's known as the order of proceedings. And last year I attended a webinar by a consultant in the Washington State area, and she kept saying order of proceedings. And after about the second time she said it, got really old. What this does is tell you how things get dealt with. How the main motion gets dealt with, how amendments get dealt with, how other items, subsidiary incidental motions get dealt with. And if you notice over here on the left, you've got 10 up to 21. So in the order of proceedings, the main motion is always at 10, because that's the lowest motion in the order of proceedings. It's not more important than anything. These other motions, kill the main motion, amend it, refer to a committee, etc., all are required to be dealt with prior to the main motion being dealt with. So let's talk about an example. And then there's also the incidental motions on here, which also have higher order of proceedings. So let's go through this a little bit. One of you decides the clerk needs a new computer. She's saying, yay. And so you make a motion, somebody seconds it, and there's some discussion, and then during discussion, somebody else thinks, why should the clerk get a new computer? Why not get a new computer for everybody? So they make a motion to amend the main motion by buying everybody a new computer. And Charlie, whose wife makes the best fried chicken in the entire world, is starting to worry about all the time it's going to take to have this computer discussion. So he makes a motion to limit discussion to 3 minutes. so that he can get home in time for his chicken dinner. But Susie, who's on to Charlie and knows it's chicken dinner night at Charlie's house, she decides to have some fun with Charlie, so she makes a motion for a recess, ostensibly to take a bathroom break, but basically the fried chicken thought has made her hungry and she wants to go out in the hall and eat a Snickers bar. So how does the chair deal with this? Because we have 4 different motions on the floor, correct? You've got the main motion, you've got the motion to amend, you've got the motion to limit debate, and you've got the motion to take a recess. That's where the numbering system is helpful. Because the first thing it gets dealt with is to take the break, because it has the highest order of proceedings. That motion passes, break for 10 minutes, because the rest of the board is now on to Charlie also and decide they're all going to have some fun with him. Not that that ever happens here. Then Charlie's motion to limit debate. Well, since they're on to Charlie, they vote that one down. Then the motion, the amendment to the motion to buy everybody a computer, discussed, it passes. So now you say to yourself, why do we have to talk about the main motion? Because we already just decided to buy everybody a computer. The reason you have to talk about the main motion is because that's the thing that started this whole conversation. So then you vote on the main motion as amended to buy everybody a computer. That passes, everybody gets a computer on the staff. They're all happy and smiling over here. So what is the life of a motion? Oh, I forgot to mention, what would have happened if Charlie's motion to limit debate to 3 minutes had passed? What would be the result of that? Charlie would be singing Winner, Winner, Chicken Dinner. Well, see, you laugh, thank you, because I've done that in other presentations, and I just get this kind of low, horrible moan. All right, so motions life start to finish. You have buttons, right, that tells you you want to obtain the floor. So you're recognized by the chair. Important. You can't start talking until the chair recognizes you. And if you do start talking before the chair recognizes you, the chair is going to whack you in the head with her big gavel. Then you make your motion. Second, chair restates. Members debate. Roberts uses debate. I like the word discuss because in my mind, debate indicates a winner and a loser, and a discussion indicates a community of interest. Put to a vote, members vote, result announced. Pretty easy, right? Pretty simple? Not so much. So again, recognized by the presiding officer. I move that. Again, clearly stated, positive. Now, this happens frequently in committee meetings. You'll have this big discussion going back and forth, and one of you finally says, I moved that, or I so moved, whatever the comments were. So the clerk is trying to take minutes going, what the heck was the motion? So that's why you want to state your motion clearly so the clerk can understand it, and more importantly, the rest of you in the meeting can understand it. Also, you'll see this a lot in courtroom dramas or in dramas on TV or movies. Someone will make a motion and say, so moved. You don't need the so moved. Just make the motion. And the motion, as I mentioned, should include a brief, heavy emphasis on the word brief, description of what you are talking about. It doesn't need to be and should not be a 30-minute dissertation about why it's a wonderful idea. Save that for the discussion. Motion gets seconded. Now, you could be 100% against the motion and still second it. You don't have to be in favor of the motion to make a second to the motion. All the second does is say you think it's worthy of discussion. It doesn't indicate you're in favor of it. So if one of you makes a motion and somebody over here seconds it and then votes against the motion, don't be mad at them. All they were saying with the second was, I think it was worthy of discussion, mostly because I wanted to kill that thing in the bud before it happened. Make sure that the second is clear and you get it in advance, and the clerk will help. In fact, we'll probably interrupt and say, who seconded that motion? Now, you have buttons, so it makes it a lot easier. But I've been in meetings where the clerk is literally banging on the table and said, stop, who made the motion and who seconded the motion? Sometimes that's not even clear. And once the motion is made, seconded, and restated by the chair, it now belongs to all of you. So whoever makes the motion whoever makes the second changes their mind the minute the chair restates, it's too late. You can only get rid of it by making a motion to withdraw. Chair restates. The reason for restating the motion is, first of all, because you may not have heard the original motion, or you're thinking about your chicken dinner or whatever it was. This gives you the second opportunity to hear the motion. Again, it transfers ownership of the motion to the body. And again, you can only withdraw it by separate motion. Now you discuss, and I hope not debate, but discuss. Discussion is important because it helps fine-tune the motion. It helps bring some additional perspectives to the issue. In committee meetings, lots of times that'll happen before you even get to any kind of motion or discussion. And you've all had a chance to discuss this. This happens frequently in committee meetings. The motion's made, seconded, and should the chair just go right to the vote? No. If you're chairing a committee meeting, you want to make sure that everybody everyone is not interested in any more discussion, and I'll talk about how to do that in a minute. Amendments. Main motions may be amended. We just went through that, right? And amendments must be germane. So in my computer example, let's say somebody else made an amendment to buy the Public Works Director a brand new Ford F-150 pickup truck. The chair could go either way on that. It's a purchase, so it might be germane. But you're talking about computers, which is a very different kind of purchase than a pickup truck. So likely the chair would say that's not germane and rule that amendment out of order. So when you're running your committees, or when the chair is running this meeting, one of your key duties as chair is to make sure that the amendments are germane to the topic of the main motion. And they do go the same way. You make your motion to amend, you have to get a second, chair restates. Amendments obviously take precedence over main motions. I just showed you how that worked. And amending the motion is a decision by the body. So someone makes a motion, someone second, chair restates, and one of you stands up and says, I want to make a friendly amendment. There is no such thing as a friendly amendment. You're making an amendment, or you're not. So you'll see that verbiage used a lot, especially at nonprofit meetings. Don't correct him, because a lot of people get mad when you do that. I've learned that the hard way. But there is no such thing as a friendly amendment. And if you want to see a really fun video, we have one on our website about friendly amendments. The only thing I'll warn you is, how many of you have been to Disney World and it's the Small, Small World ride? I'm sorry I put that song in your head, didn't I? Because it's in mine now. The music in this video is an earworm also. So you discuss the amendments. As I said, the amendments are debatable, and amendments are amendable. But if I recommend, and Roberts recommends, if you're the chair of a committee, or you're Madam Chair here, only one amendment and one amendment to amendment on the floor at any one time. Deal with the amendment, or the amendment to the amendment and the amendment. Then you can talk about the next amendment. So if you want to make another amendment, wait for all that discussion and vote to happen, then make your amendment. And once it's voted on, the matter's settled. So let's say in the example of buying everybody a computer, someone raises their hand and makes a motion to buy everybody an electronic device. Is that not the same as a computer? So the chair would rule that out of order because the matter's been settled. So keep that in mind, that if the chair rules against you, because in the chair's opinion, the matter's been settled and you're just trying to find a semantic way to get it back on the floor. So during the discussion, refer to committee. It's become apparent you want the committee to do some work on that. So you make a motion to refer to committee. The motion is amendable, so one of the amendments might be, I'm in favor of referring it to committee, but I would like to report back at our next meeting, or in 2 meetings. And which is why it's usually made with a date certain. And if you're chairing the committee, and this chair I know does it, one of the things should be asked if someone wants to refer it to committee is, do you wish to have the committee report back to the board, or the at a date certain. Postpone and table. So as I mentioned before, tabling a motion is one of the most confused things that most people deal with when they're talking about motions. If any of you watch C-SPAN or the nightly news about the Congress, they operate under their own special weird little rules. They do not operate under Robert's Rules of Order. So when they table something, it's dead forever. Under Roberts, when you table something in a meeting, you've got your agenda item, you might move to table agenda item 3 and replace it with agenda item 10 because agenda item 10 has got a lot of people in the room that want to talk about it, so you don't want to have them wait the whole time. It might be a more pressing issue, whatever it is. So you would move to table the motion until you get, or switch 10 and 3. If you table a motion without having any discussion about bringing it back, it requires a new motion to bring it back on the table. So if an item gets tabled and you think about it before the next meeting and you say, you know what, I want to bring that back. So at the next meeting, you make a motion to bring it back off the table. Can you discuss it at the next meeting? No, because of the open meetings law. It's not on the agenda. You can make a motion to bring it back at the next future meeting, because then it can get on the agenda and won't be an open meetings law violation. So that's the one quirk and one difference between Roberts and Wisconsin law. Postponing indefinitely effectively kills the motion, because indefinite is forever, correct? So if you're the chair, if someone moves the table, you should inquire as to their intent. Do they wish to bring it up later in the same meeting? Do they wish to bring it up at the next meeting or some date in the future? Or do they want to kill it? In which case, it should be a motion to postpone indefinitely. So if you're in a meeting and someone moves to table something and the chair doesn't ask those questions, you can make a point of order asking what the intent is. But you have a good chair here, so you won't have that problem. Okay, you put to a vote. So remember I said earlier, looked like there was a lot of discussion, everybody's pretty ready to vote. One way the chair can ensure that, without having to have a motion to close discussion, is to say, is there any further discussion? Looking around the room, there's none. The chair can say, well, by unanimous consent, we'll go to a vote. Another way to do that is, are you ready to vote? Basically does the same thing. If they're all nodding their heads, you can say, okay, by unanimous consent, we're going to move to the vote. The last bullet point I picked up from a county chair a couple of years ago, which I thought was great, as a great way to limit discussion or get people to focus, is are there any new points before we vote? Because everybody shakes their head no, because you've just been rehashing the same points over and over, then the chair can say, well, then I suggest we vote. And if you're all nodding your heads, then you move to the vote. However, the chair cannot decide by herself or yourself, if you're a committee chair, just to stop discussion. That requires a motion to close discussion, requires a 2/3 vote to move forward. So if the chair asks any further discussion and 3 people raise their hand, then obviously there's a need or an interest in having more discussion, and it should happen. But if one of you thinks there's been enough discussion, you can make a motion to close debate, in which case discussion would stop until the motion is seconded and voted on. You also might make a motion to close discussion and nobody seconds it, which is a pretty clear indication everybody wants more discussion. Because what happens to a motion if there's no second? There's no motion. And if you want to see a really interesting video on that, Google, or on YouTube rather, City of Carpentersville, Illinois. There's a number of videos because they've done a lot of crazy things down there. But the one I like best is the first one. It's about 12 minutes long. It has to do with the mayor trying to make an appointment to appointing a citizen to a board, and he asks for a motion. And in this case, somebody does move, he asks for a second, and nobody else seconds it. And the board's like 10 people. And then the meeting goes downhill from that. If you want to skip through a lot of the downhill stuff and get to the last minute, these people say things to each other that I wouldn't say to my best friend ever. So it's pretty interesting. So then the presiding officer restates the question and the effect of a yes or no vote, which is another reason not to have negative motions, because it's hard to talk about the effect of the yes or no vote if it's not clear. And again, if you want to end debate, it requires 2/3 vote. So I mentioned earlier I was from Illinois, which is why I use vote early and vote often. That was our motto when I was growing up in the Daly years. So you can take votes in a variety of ways. You use push buttons, so that makes it simple. My favorite is the division of assembly, which is what the English Parliament does, and that's when the group heads off to the nay room and the rest of the other group heads off to the aye room, and they count heads. But it's really important, since you have electronic voting, it's not as much of an issue, but for your committee meetings, really important that you, even if it looks like it's unanimous, you always ask, are there any no votes? Because someone might not have said anything and then votes no. So you want the minutes to reflect the yeas and nays votes. So, a quorum must vote. You have 21 members on your board, so what's a quorum? 11. I was seeing it, didn't I? See, I told you she was fun. Unless there's a roll call vote, there's no way to record an individual abstaining. And under Wisconsin law, you use push buttons, so you know everybody's vote, so we won't go to that. But for your committee meetings, if you have, yay, everybody else, you have a voice vote, everybody says yay, or you think everybody says yay. If somebody says, I would like a roll call vote, you have to have a roll call vote. And then you need to note each member of the committee and whether they voted yes or no. But you're not required to vote. Under a case involving the city of Madison, which should come as no surprise to all of you, they had a council member who refused to vote. Madison had a rule saying you had to vote, and if you didn't vote, you'd be sanctioned. This person got sanctioned. He went to federal court and said, I have a First Amendment right not to vote. And the federal district court agreed. So, you have a First Amendment right not to vote. So I hope, especially for some of you new people, you recognize, well, I'll just take a pass then because I won't have to vote. You were elected to make decisions, so please vote. Conflicts of interest. I could spend 2 hours giving you an ethics presentation, and you would all be sleeping at about 10 minutes, 10 minutes into it. But if you have a conflict of interest, you must remove yourself from participation in voting, and my recommendation is to get out of the room. And if you think you have a conflict of interest, do you have an ethics? Okay, so you check with your ethics board about what you should do properly, or you should check with your corporation counsel, or both. But I suggest you remove yourself from the room, and the reason for that is even your body language might influence somebody else when you're having a conflict. You don't have to disclose what the conflict is. You just have to say you have a conflict. And once you leave the room, you're treated as absent for quorum purposes. So if you've got 11 people in the room and one of you has a conflict, you no longer have a quorum, which means you can no longer do your business. Now you have the result. Presiding officer announces the result, whether the motion carried or failed, and the number of votes on each side, which should be easy since you had the electronic voting. So earlier we talked a little bit about points of order. And that's when something's happening in the meeting that you think needs to be fixed. So you need to do that when it happens. You can't go home and think about it and bring it up at the next meeting and say, hey, we didn't do that right. Because the next meeting it's too late. Deal's done. You state the reason for your point of order. I make a point of order that the chair is off the agenda. The chair may not like that agenda item, so the chair may say, I rule against your point of order. In which case, you can appeal the chair's decision. Now, unlike the Ukraine Parliament from 10 years ago, don't throw eggs at the chair for disagreeing with you. And the other thing about this photo I think is interesting is, who thought to bring an umbrella to keep the eggs off them and then did such a poor job? So you appeal the decision of the chair. The chair says the decision of the chair has been appealed. Then the chair clearly states the exact question and issue and the reasons that the chair made the point of order on the decision, and which means the chair would then have to admit, I don't want that agenda item, so I would decide to skip it. Then you vote. And you vote, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? So if you vote yes, that agenda item's gone. If you vote no, then you got to go back to the agenda in the proper order. So John Lennon, and when I found this, I could hardly believe it, but I think it's a great statement. Trying to please everyone is impossible. If you did that, you'd end up in the middle with nobody liking you. You just got to make a decision about what you think is best and do it. Anybody else besides me surprised John Lennon said that? I was. So, 2 final slides. First, as county board supervisors, as committee members, as a collective body, you can never over-communicate, in my opinion. So, over-communicate often. Show up prepared. Even when you disagree, respect the other person's opinion. Just because they have a different opinion doesn't mean they're a terrible person. It just means they have a different opinion. Don't question the motives, their motives of opinion. Assume pure motives always. Use and respect the chain of command. We talked about that early. Use the critical thinker graphic I showed you to help you question facts, to understand the basis, and especially the implications of your decisions. And seek diversity of input to make better decisions. I teach a lot on diversity and equity, and I know in a lot of places equity is a bad word for a whole lot of reasons. But in my mind, all equity does is help people have the opportunity for equality. So diversity, you all bring different perspectives to this, all your decision making. Value those perspectives. Work with each other to learn more about those perspectives. There's a lot of great studies on the corporate world side that show corporations that have at least 30% of their board is women perform better, both from a corporation operation standpoint, stock price, pick your measure, than corporations that don't. And I think that same rule applies to you folks. Now remember, I'm a guy with 3 daughters and 2 granddaughters, so I kind of got a women thing going in my life. But I'm glad to see a lot of some women on this board. Don't, and this is really important, don't assume political campaign behavior equals governance behavior. You may have run for the board and you may have promised your residents, your voters, you're going to do this, this, and this, and then you got here and realized you can't do this, this, and this unless you can convince a majority of people to work with you on doing this, this, and this. So focus on the fact that you're now a collective body, a collective governance body. Don't assume the staff has a bias because they really like the person you just beat in the election. The staff is professional, they're here to do a professional job. Part of that professional job is to work with all of you. However, in some places, I don't think that happens here, some staff try to go around the administrator or around the rules and talk to you individually about their problems, kind of lobby you for more money or what have you. Don't let that happen. If that happens, you should tell Todd, hey, I just got this call from this guy or he stopped by my office, yada, yada. Don't provide long, wordy, boring documents because you know why? They won't get read, right? The joke used to be with President Reagan that if it was longer than a page, he wouldn't read it. I think that's true pretty much of all of us. If, provide the bullet points you need. Obviously, don't disrespect each other or the staff. Don't assume the facts that are being presented to you, tell the whole story. Use that critical thinker approach I provided you earlier. And most importantly, don't be a potted plant. Just don't show up here and sit in your chair and do nothing. You're all here elected to represent your constituents. Do a good job with them. And with that, thank you very much. I hope this was helpful and useful. And I hope I didn't get too preachy. I kind of get on a soapbox once in a while. But my real goal with this is not to tell you you should do this or should that, but to present you some information to help you think better about the things you're going to be doing. So with that, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
Are there any questions before he leaves? We have a couple of questions, if that's all right.
I didn't say I was taking questions. Yes, sir.
Supervisor Huffberger.
I'm sorry, I forgot who was running the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Daniel. I'm one of the veterans on your first thing, but I learned something. I'm a appreciate what you told us, and it's good to have that once in a while. I'm glad whoever gave this to us did give this to us, because it's good to have. I was a little surprised at one thing, though, and maybe I took it out of context, but I was surprised to hear that I think you said we should bring all our constituent issues to Todd.
No, I didn't say, I apologize if that's how it came out. What I meant was, if someone calls you because they think they've got some potholes on their street that need to be fixed, well, first of all, let me say this. You folks and Todd should figure out how the communication chain of command works. In a lot of places, the administrator likes the board to bring the concerns to him or her, and then they can figure out how to get them dealt with. I've been in other places where the administrator, county manager, basically is more than happy to have the board talk directly to the staff. So probably where I misspoke was to say you folks and Todd should have a chain of command discussion so that you all know what the rules are. Fair enough?
That's fair.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Supervisor Steer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's kind of a related question. Suppose two members of your supervisors or trustees are firemen, and they're proposing, possibly discussing and building a new fire station. Should they excuse themselves and?
Okay, so that's a great ethics question that I'm not going to respond to directly. That's the reason you have an ethics committee, and that's the reason you have corporation counsel. What I would do if I were them, is have that discussion with the ethics committee about what's proper and not proper for them to do.
Okay.
How about that for kind of sliding by and not answering your
All
question?
right. Thank you.
At least I'm honest about it.
Supervisor Hulshoe? Over here on the end.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, excuse me, I thought I heard you say that it was a state law that if you're not in the building, you can't vote. Did you say that?
I did.
And is that
You
if?
have to be in the meeting.
You have to be at the meeting, okay. Even if we pass,
Well, if it's a virtual meeting, that would be different.
yes, I understand that. Oh, but if our Calumet County passed a resolution or a motion that we would allow it, is it still illegal?
Corporation counsel, I believe you have to be present to vote in Wisconsin.
Well, our rule says if it's a virtual, if they're allowed to be present
Yeah.
virtually, they can vote.
Right, and that, yeah, but
But that means if I'm here and Matthew's at home, can he vote from home?
if he's participating virtually, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good distinction, thank you.
Supervisor Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My comment to all this is the quickest way to fail is to try to please everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Miller, and thank you, Dan.
Good, thank you all, I appreciate the time. Oh, can I add one more, can I amend my presentation? I was at, one of the things I do is I'm the director of our Certified Public Manager program, and that is if you've got staff who are heading into middle management, they're great technical people, but you want to make managers, leaders, or executives out of them, that program is a terrific program for them to get involved with, and I'll be lobbying Todd later about that discussion. We also run the Wisconsin Law Enforcement Command College, which is a CPM program for law enforcement officers. You may have had some folks go through that. Last Friday, we had our graduation, and the graduation speaker said something that I thought was pretty profound for a couple of reasons. He talked about the fact when Eisenhower made the decision to move forward with D-Day, he wrote 2 speeches. He wrote a speech about how wonderful it was they were doing so well, and he wrote a speech about how the invasion failed, but he took responsibility on himself for the failure. And the speech he wrote about the fact that the invasion was going well, he gave the credit to everybody else. He didn't take it for himself. So the last point I wanted to make, and I fortunately didn't turn around before I did that, is own your mistakes and share the credit. That's the greatest way to work with each other. And with that, I'm done now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving back on to our meeting, we will start with the resolutions. Resolution 2022-08.
Resolution approving a one-time adjustment to the reimbursable formula between the MANITOWOC-CALUMET Library System and the OUTAGAMIE-WAUPACA Library System, introduced by the Administrative Services Committee.
All right, I have a motion by Supervisor Booty and a second by Supervisor Miller. And Supervisor Diedrich, would you speak to this resolution, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is not very, this is very straightforward, but a lot of you may not know what's really behind it, so I'm going to take a couple of minutes to explain for those of you who are not involved with libraries or didn't have the benefit of being at Admin Services Committee meeting. First of all, OWLS stands for OUTAGAMIE-WAUPACA Library System. MCLS stands for MANITOWOC-CALUMET Library System. And there have been agreements between these two library systems that go back to, I think it's 1985, that allow residents of Calumet County to access libraries outside the county, such as in Appleton, right? Residents without a library in their town, such as if you're not in Brillion, Chilton, or Holstein, you are assessed by your town, municipality, or township or municipality assessment, a levy for your library usage based on library usage. That's what we're talking about here. So key to this resolution is the 1985 agreement between OWLS and MCLS. And that lays out the reimbursement formula and includes a 10% cap on year-to-year circulation growth. That's the key to what's going on here tonight. The 10% cap has not been an issue until the pandemic cut circulation by more than 50%. So in other words, during 2020, the library usage went down significantly. So the people in northwestern part of the county did not go up to Appleton, Menasha, or whatever to check out books. In fact, a lot of the times the libraries were closed. You couldn't check out books. So the library circulation was cut by more than half. Not an issue. It didn't change anything there. However, with the rebound in 2021, the circulation formula limits the ability of the OWLS to recoup circulation compensation for services to Calumet County. Most notably, Harrison, Shorewood, and Woodville, for example. The idea being that when the circulation dropped in 2020, when you come back now in 2021, there's a 10% limit based on what the circulation was in 2021. So you can see, artificially, unintended, the compensation has been impacted. So on May 18th, the Calumet County Library Services Administrative Advisory Committee met and reviewed the annual circulation figures and to approve those for inclusion in the 2023 budget. That's an annual meeting, happens every year. OWLS submitted their request to that committee. The committee approved it and passed it on to the county for approval. And what OWLS did is they're simply asking for a one-time adjustment in the 2021 circulation to get it back to what would be, quote, a normal circulation compensation. So on June 14th, last week, the Administrative Services Committee reviewed the request, unanimously approved it, and forwarded it to this body for resolution. Now, before we open this to discussion, let me point out three things. This action is time critical. State statute requires that the budget figures be finalized by July 1st, 2022. So we have to take some action tonight. Secondly, OWLS is requesting a one-time adjustment that is somewhat below actual. You didn't have the benefit of the actual letter request, but I'll show you some numbers. 2021 circulation by the OWLS libraries to Calumet County residents was 61,513 checkouts, if you want to call it that. And they are requesting an adjustment to only 47,905. So significantly less than what was actual. All right. So I feel the request is reasonable and should be approved. And I'd like to, those of you who might not be familiar with, the final whereas in the resolution is significant. It says, reminds us that the levy to support the public libraries are not subject to levy limits and are levied only on those municipalities and towns that do not maintain a public library. So bottom line, although this approval in this resolution will increase the reimbursement to OWLs for 2023, it doesn't really impact the county tax levy, but it will assess, as it should, those individual areas that are not in municipalities with libraries. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back to the board.
All right, are there any questions of Supervisor Diedrich? Hearing none, then your motion is to approve the one-time adjustment to reimbursable formula between the MANITOWOC-CALUMET library system and the OUTAGAMIE-WAUPACA library system. You may please vote your ballot. Oh, all right. Okay, we have 19 yes, 0 nay, 2 absent, so that resolution has been adopted. Moving on to Resolution 2020. Oh, excuse me. Moving on to Resolution 2022-09.
Resolution creating .5 full-time equivalent chief deputy medical examiner and amending the salary of the medical examiner in the Calumet County Medical Examiner's Office effective upon adoption. Introduced by the Administrative Services Committee.
I have a motion by Supervisor Booty. A second by Supervisor Schwallenberg. And Supervisor Diedrich, would you speak to this resolution?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is an interesting one, and just to remind everyone, it's going to require a 2/3 majority vote because it will affect the current year's budget. The resolution we have before us addresses a problem of how to fairly compensate those medically trained and qualified individuals who serve the county as medical examiners. Heretofore, they have been on call without compensation every day, including weekends and holidays. They have been classified as casual hires, paid only if and when actually called to conduct an investigation or otherwise carry out their duties. To remedy this and hopefully retain our dedicated staff, this resolution will create a 1/2 full-time equivalent position of Chief Deputy Medical Examiner. Secondly, it will set salary for that Chief Deputy and for the Medical Examiner, whose position will remain casual. The result is that these individuals will be paid a salary to remain on call and carry out the responsibilities of the office. And to make you understand that, currently they're on call, they don't get any compensation unless they're actually called to service. This changes that. This basically gives them a salary, expects them to respond to calls, etc. So we kind of understand the subtle difference there. As I said before, this will impact the 2022 budget. The salary estimated for the balance of the year on these two positions would be about $67,384, and it will be paid out of the general fund balance.
Okay. Are there any questions regarding this resolution? Supervisor Gleckner.
Did I not?
I'm leaning towards supporting this, but I just want to ask, as the salary that we would be adopting, how does it relate to the average over the last 5 years that we've paid out for the actual service provided, based on the number of deaths occurred?
I don't have a 5-year average on number of deaths. Do you, Mike?
I've got a 3-year average. For the past 3 years, my chief deputy has spent an average of 800 hours per year investigating deaths.
I've spent approximately 200 hours per year investing in deaths. Our numbers have increased from approximately 112 deaths per year about the last time I reported to the board, which was about 8 years ago now, I guess at least, to close to 300 per year now. In terms of reimbursement, my average over the last 3 years was probably close to $10,000, and the average of my chief deputy was close to $30,000.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
So this proposed salary is less money than you've been making in the past?
No, not for me.
10,000.
We came up, the proposed salary was based upon our average number of hours spent, plus our average number of hours on call, and we balanced that out over the last 3 years. We had an extensive, I'm sorry. Thank you.
We had a survey done of all the counties in the state, requested information from them. We came up with kind of a population-based formula, worked all that out, and came actually very close to what we've worked out with administrative and our personnel department. We essentially will be getting a significant raise, but it requires us, obviously, to take the call, which we have been doing, and gives us some compensation for that. The net difference really essentially becomes the call pay, which is lumped into this salary.
Maybe I heard incorrectly, but I thought I heard that we were going to pay 6,700?
No, 67,000.
67,000, okay, okay.
Well,
I did hear wrong.
the chief deputy is a $63,000 annual salary, and the medical examiner is a $46,000 annual salary.
Yeah.
That's the request, that for the remainder of the year that their compensation be changed and the budget be amended to pay for that.
Okay, thank you.
That's including on-call and all investigations, so that's all inclusive of the time and work that
Yeah.
they would do.
And people don't always die at the most convenient time of the day.
No.
So, thank you.
Supervisor Halshu?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Are we talking about two different things here? We're talking about a new position and a salary for a person that's already in a position. That almost sounds to me like it's two different issues.
So what this actually is, and I realized after reviewing it in a few conversations with board members, it's a little confusing. So Regina Banky has already been employed as a chief deputy medical examiner. For all intents and purposes, how long? Like 16 years?
14 years.
14 years. So what we're doing is we're converting a casual employee position to a half-time, which is basically what she's performing anyway. We're correcting something or making something reflect what it's actually happening. Given the way we currently are, and the reason this is being recommended the way it is today is because of Mike and Regina and the way that office is structured and currently operates. So to make her a half-time is essentially what she's doing now, or compensating her for that to be on call. So it's not adding a position per se, it's changing a casual to a 0.5 full-time equivalent.
Does that answer your question, Supervisor Halshu?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Huffberger?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like Mike to introduce himself and tell him what he does. And I also would like to say I'm kind of glad that this come up from the standpoint, it was interesting to read the job description. I kind of know what he does, but it was awesome to read the real responsibilities of that position. Who are you, Mike, and what's your job?
My name is Mike Glazer, and I am the Calumet County Medical Examiner. I was appointed to that position back in 1996 or 1998, after I had been a member of the department since 1985. I investigate deaths per state statute 979, any unusual deaths, any deaths that are not attended by physicians. We supervise all hospice deaths that occur within the county. In other words, essentially we review the circumstances of death. And our job is to certify the manner and means of death. In other words, we put our names on a document that becomes a permanent state record as to this is why this person died and this is the manner in which they died. And that document may or may not be important to some people, but it is to some people in terms of permanent records, research records, legal issues in terms of insurance reimbursement, legal issues in terms of criminal liability, both accidental and intentional. My chief deputy, Regina Benke, has been with us for 14 years. She does basically the day-to-day operations. I typically cover all the PM shift and night shift, the overnight shifts. I am still employed part-time at the Ascension-Calumet Hospital as a nurse anesthetist, and I've been there for 40 some odd years. In essence, all deaths that occur in this county are reviewed by us in one manner or another. There's hardly an investigation that goes by that we don't discuss with each other our findings and look at all the details. We request medical records, police reports, interviews with next of kin or witnesses, and we evaluate all those items before we certify. Once we certify, we're kind of done. We want to do the best to our medical knowledge to be correct in our certifications. And believe me, it becomes important for family members from time to time just exactly why this person has died. And sometimes we can't explain it. We facilitate autopsies when they're indicated. We use the services of a forensic pathologist in Fond du Lac County to provide most of our autopsies. Sometimes we have to go to Milwaukee County to get that, and sometimes to Madison to do that. We also certify all cremations, which is becoming a very common means of what is called final disposition. We treat cremation authorizations as if they are a death investigation. We need to know why that person has died. Did a physician sign the death certificate or not? Is that death certificate accurate? Possibly, was there an accident involved previously? Did the patient fall and break their hip and then die of pneumonia? And someone forgets to list that, that becomes a coroner case for us to investigate. Why did that accident happen? Where did they fall? What time did it occur? Those kinds of things have to be hashed out in order to properly certify a death. And and we try to keep a record of all that stuff, permanent records. Our records are permanent. They are never discarded. And so the county has provided us with office space, equipment, and a database that we use to record all of those things. We meet with the DA every now and then, provide him with information. So we're having lots of fun.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. The motion is to create a half full-time equivalent chief deputy medical examiner and amending the salary of the medical examiner in the Calumet County Medical Examiner's Office. Please vote your ballot. We have 19 yes, 0 nay, 2 absent. We have the 2/3 vote, so that resolution has been adopted. Moving on to Resolution 2022-10.
Resolution authorizing funds from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law STP Rural Project 44890200-70 for the purpose of reconstructing County Trunk Highway G from State Trunk Highway 151 to East Jefferson Road and budget in 2022 for design costs and 2023 for construction of funds, introduced by the Highway Committee.
I have a motion by Supervisor Booty and a second by Supervisor Miller. And Supervisor Booty, would you address this resolution, please?
Thank you very much. So the matter at hand here is fortunate that Calumet County was one of the few counties in the state to be selected in the fiscal year 2022 grant funding through the BIL for the Surface Transportation Program. Throughout the state, there were $263 million worth of project requests, and there were $60 million of funding available in this fiscal year. So Calumet County has quite a success to get this funding for it. As you can see, and as was stated, this has two different segments to it, both to fund the design costs for this year and then to authorize, I guess pre-authorize, that we are going to prepare our 23 budget to include the funding for the county's share of construction costs. If you have any further questions, feel free to ask. Brian is also here if you have anything in particular for him. Thanks.
Are there any questions regarding this resolution? All right, seeing none, the motion is to authorize funds for the bipartisan infrastructure law, which would do the purpose of County G from State 151 East Jefferson Road and budget for the 2022 design cost and construction. Please vote your ballot. We have 19 yes, 0 nay, 2 absent. It has received the 2/3 vote, so that resolution has been adopted. All right, moving on to supervisory reports. If anyone has anything to report from any meetings or seminars they attended, please push your request to speak. Supervisor Booty.
Thank you again. From June 6th through the 8th, myself, Supervisors Dietrich and Stuckman attended the Wisconsin County Highway Association's Summer Road School. There we were treated to numerous classes and meetings with Wisconsin DOT officials. Namely, some of the classes we had sessions included a in-depth discussion of the General Transportation Aid funding formula. I can give you a nice long explanation of all that, but the short form is that a consistent investment of county money into our highway system is rewarded through GTA funding from the state. So, for example, the County Trunk Highway G funding that we're getting through the federal government should be in addition to and not in lieu of county expenditures on highway funding if we want to maintain a positive GTA formula. In addition to that, the other outstanding session included work zone safety innovations. Throughout the state, there will be pilot programs coming up this construction season, including mobile barrier units and connected devices on cones and barricades, which can communicate to smart cars and other messaging systems. On last Wednesday, the 14th, the Highway Committee had their meeting. In addition to bringing forward the County G funding resolution, which we just discussed, the County Committee approved town bridge aid requests, and we met with Wisconsin DOT Northeast Regional staff to discuss operations and current future year projects that will be affecting Calumet County. And then yesterday, one of those such projects, the United States Highway 151, State Trunk Highway 55 project scheduled for 2025, had a public informational meeting which I attended. That project is going to include replacing pipe culverts, box culverts, and one bridge structure from the South County line through the village of Stockbridge. If you have any further questions on any of these items, feel free to talk with me later, and I can give you further information. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Booty. Supervisor Schwallenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We didn't have a parks meeting this month, but I was talking to the park ranger. Due to the storm we had some fish killed down at the harbor that he had to be cleaning up along with the debris that was being washed up in the harbor also. And his comment was some of the fish were quite large. Most of them were carp, is what he said. We're still having issues with supply chain as far as getting the things we need to finish our cabins and whatever. Health and Human Services, the state was in to audit our home health and hospice. There were a few things that needed to be changed. They were mostly as far as record keeping was concerned. Supervisor or Chair Connors and myself attended a meeting with a part of the thank you tour with the governor and the Secretary of Health. It was held at the Public Safety Center at Fox Valley Tech. This was arranged by the health officers from Winnebago, OUTAGAMIE, Calumet, Arbonne, Colby, and the Oneida tribe. Most of our health nurses were there too, along with the pastor from St. Martin's Church here in Chilton that had allowed us to use their facilities for the clinic. And there was a pharmacist there who had opened their pharmacy in the valley. I think Smith was his name too. But then we also toured a facility that a lot of us weren't aware of. If you read Mary Carell's newsletter, it's the building built by Faith Technologies down in Stockbridge, which is considered their, quote, vision centered, which to me means you go there to get glasses, but that's not what it is. Everything is off the grid, and the day we were there, you really could take advantage of the air conditioning because some of the people had problems with the heat outside. It is quite a facility to see. It is, my question was it going to be another venue like for weddings and such, but it is not. It is strictly for businesses, for business meetings, although it is a beautiful facility and has an unobstructed view of Lake Winnebago. They have a big solar farm there, and their vision, or possible vision, is possibly to provide electricity to some houses down in that area that may want it or may be built in the future. Like I said, it is an amazing facility that we didn't know existed. I believe that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple things. For supervisors who signed up for the various steering committee meetings with Wisconsin Counties Association, all those have been confirmed by me, and you will be receiving a letter very shortly letting you know what committees you're on and any future dates that the meetings will be held. The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was the September meeting, county board meeting, also falls on that weekend of the county board conference in the Dells, and many of us will be going. Also that night, Tuesday night, will be the county board meeting, and as far as we are concerned right now, that meeting will be held. So just remember that when you get done with the conference, there is a county board meeting that evening in September. Okay? That's all I wanted to talk to you about that. I will talk to you later on in the meeting. We have the county administrator's monthly report. Are there any questions regarding his report? All right, we'll place that on file. We have the reappointment to the Zoning Board of Adjustments, and are recommending the reappointment of Deb Reinhardt, whose term will expire June 30th, 2025. I have a motion by Supervisor Booty, second by Supervisor Schwallenberg, to confirm that appointment. Are there any questions? All right, the motion is to confirm her appointment. Please vote your ballot. Supervisor Holcher, would you confirm, please? Thank you. 19 yes, 0 nay, 2 absent, the majority vote, so that appointment has been reaffirmed. We also have an appointment to the Manitowoc-CALUMET Library System, and we're recommending the appointment of Mary Hirth to fill the vacancy left by the resignation of Phil Virgo, whose term expired January 1, 2023. I have a motion by Supervisor Booty and a second by Supervisor Hufsberger to recommend the appointment of Mary Hirth to fill that vacancy. Are there any questions? Please vote your ballot. We have 19 votes, 0 nay, 2 absent. We have a majority vote, so that appointment has been confirmed. Now we're going to talk about setting the special meeting date in August. The date is for our strategic plan workshop for all the county boards and department heads. It is my suggestion, and I'm open to a discussion for any other reason, to have that at the same time we have our county board meeting that evening. We would start the county board meeting earlier at 6 o'clock, take care of any county business that we have to take care of, and then move on to the strategic plan. It could go 8:30 to 9 o'clock, so I just was wondering what your thoughts were. Please push your button to request to speak. Anybody want to do anything different? Mary?
Seeing as nobody's going to say anything, I agree with what you're saying because of the fact that we all have to come for the meeting anyway, and the people that have jobs during the day, otherwise we used to do it during the day, and it does take several hours. So I would go along with your suggestion.
All right, if there is no other objection to that, then I need a motion to change the time of the August 19th meeting to 6 o'clock. All right, I have a motion by Supervisor Diedrich and a second by Supervisor Steer. Are there any questions regarding that particular meeting now?
August 19th or 16th?
August 16th, was it? Yeah. Thank you. All right, if not, please vote your ballot to change the time to 6 p.m. Supervisor Johnston, would you confirm, please? Thank you. We have 19 yes, 0 nay, 2 absent. All right, thank you for that. Our next regular meeting will be July 19th at 7 p.m. if we need one. And so, taking care of all the business tonight, I move for the adjournment. And thank you for your attention this evening.
You want to be fed?
What?
Alice is pretty generous.
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website
She'll make me
at
cook something.
www.